and pull up the next presentation.
Espero que llegue.
All right, here's our next presentation, Worldwide Market Opportunities for Lay English Translation Students, what we have compared to what they want. Now, this presentation came about because what I found many, many years ago with our LEMO students actually had two different areas, translation and teaching. And I think some of you may have expected the same thing when you started studying, meaning that maybe you were planning on studying both, translation instead of teaching. And you said, I didn't want to study teaching, I wanted to study translation when I got here. And oh, well, you have to study teaching. I do want to say that, especially when you're starting out, having to do teaching and having translation as secondary is probably your best bet. Because when you first start out in translation, it is very difficult to get enough work to be able to support yourself on full time. Very few students do this. So teaching is a good option for a good steady job, and translation then is secondary. However, it's not impossible to be able to start out with a translation job. And there are many degrees in translation in Mexico where the students start out right away in translation and don't have any problem supporting themselves. So this came out when we had the degree in translation. But what I found in the degree in translation was that the students were not being prepared for the real world translation, meaning that they were studying discourse analysis and they were studying technical translation and medical translation, literary translation and translation theories and this and this and this and that, but they weren't getting any real world experience. They were just getting what they were getting in the classroom. It wasn't authentic and it did not give them what they needed. There was actually a subject called technology and translation, and we're going to look at this in a minute. Technology and translation was not giving them what they needed. It was not working with translation memory. It was not working with design programs that some clients want the translator to work in. So it really was not doing a whole lot of anything except using automatic translators. So really the what we have is what you are getting in the translation electives. And the what they want is what you're going to find in the real world. Now, my question, and we're going to see it at the end again, my question is, do you have what they want or are you missing something? And I think this is the purpose of this talk, is to have you be able to look at what you have and compare that to what's expected from a translator, all right? Now, the reason for this research, as we said, saturated market in Puebla. Now, I say saturated market in Puebla. There's a lot of work. There is a lot of translation work out there. But the thing is, it goes to certain people. It goes to certain people. Honestly, in English, there may be 10 English translators in Puebla. Maybe I'm exaggerating. And really, people go to them because they're established, because they have experience, because they're certified for whatever reason. And what happens with newcomers? What happens with students who finish their degree and they say, okay, I'm ready? Or students who haven't finished their degree yet, but want to start in translation, they're gonna have a difficult time getting that work. There's a lot of work. It's just a matter of being able to get it. Right? The need for certification in Puebla. Now, we're going to see later on that certification is not a big part of translation work. However, certification is a certain niche in the translation field. And if you have certification, you can do certain types of documents. And if you don't, either you have to do them and have a friend who does, or reject them. And you know that when you're starting out as a translator, it's very difficult to reject translations because you want them. The need for translation students to expand. The world is at our fingertips right now. And so really, with the technology that we have nowadays, we do not need to stay in Puebla. We can expand ourselves and work in different countries, work with different agencies. Maybe we never meet these people in real life. It's okay. But we have that communication with them so that we're able to translate. That's the important thing, because previously we had to stay in the city of Puebla or in surrounding areas. But nowadays, we can work with translation agencies, companies throughout the entire world. And I think it's important for students to do this in order to see what's happening in other parts. And the need for our students in school to realize that we're not always meeting the demands, right? We're not giving our students what they need in order to face real world. After the whole presentation and you see what's happening outside, we're going to come back to that question. Do you have what is wanted in the real world? And we're going to see that in the couple of translation electives that you take, you're probably not getting a large part of this. And so what do we do from here? You run with it. If translation is something that you do, we're going to give you some ideas of ways to get yourself out there and to be able to get translation experience. Okay. So the websites, what I did was from March to September last year, I went through these 4 websites and I looked for all of the postings from English to Spanish. So anyone who was looking for a translator from English to Spanish, which is the language combination that you would be working with right now. And I took every job that was offered for those 6 months from English to Spanish from these 4 websites. And this is what I use to get the graphs that you're going to see next about what they're asking for. Okay, so only English to Spanish jobs from March to September in these 4 pages. And the first thing that we have, I was wondering how many of these postings look for native Spanish speakers. And you can see that the yellow-green part here is native Spanish speakers. So for example, for a job from English to Spanish, you would have the advantage over me because I'm not a native Spanish speaker. Now you see that you can fall into obviously the whole thing because Spanish is your native language, but you have an advantage over non-native Spanish speakers when it comes to English to Spanish jobs because many of them do look for native Spanish speakers. And I didn't specify this because it wasn't until later that I realized it, but a lot of them do ask for Spanish from specific areas. So there might be a certain job where they say, we need native speakers from Mexico, okay? And that's exactly where you would fall into in that job. Now, the next posting was postings for specific residents. And this, I think, is going to be changing as we progress, because here we do have a specific residence in the yellow-green and no specific residence in the blue and gray. And the specific residence for English to Spanish is probably going to be either United States or Mexico. And if it is Mexico, well, you've got it. But as the world opens up and as there are more opportunities to be in touch online, I mean, how many of us would have imagined taking class the way we are nowadays? I believe this posting for specific residents is going to go down. And no specific residence will be required for the majority of the jobs. Now, the postings for a specific dialect, the large yellow piece that you see there is no specification, which that's yours. I mean, you can use that. And many times we do have to be careful from what we saw in the previous presentation that maybe they're looking for a generic neutral dialect to be used, right? And you can see that Mexican dialect is the light blue box, which is still a very good chunk of the pie. So in this case, you have both the yellow and the blue parts for no specific dialect and for Mexican dialect. Those are the ones that you can work in. We have a white neutral dialect, a dark tan Latin American dialect. Those are areas also where you could be working. So specific dialect, it's open. There's a lot of opportunities for us, either not specifying a dialect or having a Mexican dialect. Now, specific types of jobs, translation is the biggest one, okay? And this is one of those areas where we can open ourselves up for work opportunities, because maybe we only think about doing translation. However, we see that even though translation is the biggest part, we still have transcription, proofreading is the largest part of the small ones, localization, the voiceover, in-house work, meaning working specifically for a company in-house, project manager, editor, subtitling, consecutive interpretation, and simultaneous interpretation. So in order to make yourself more flexible, more valuable, you could possibly get involved in working with interpretation or learning what a project manager does to be able to manage the translation projects that come into an agency. And a lot of project manager involves working with software in order to organize the workload and know exactly who is working on what at what moment, right? Localization and voiceover, dubbing. Now, voices dubbing, there's two parts to this. One of them is actually translating and getting the text that's going to be dubbed. And another part of this is the voice artist, meaning making the voice. So possibly we're not going to be actually working with our voices, but we're going to be preparing what the voice artist will say. However, maybe we have a little bit of an actor inside of us and we take some courses to be able to work with our voice and become a voice actor. So there are a lot of different opportunities for us, not just in translation, but to make ourselves more open to other types of jobs within the translation area. A lot of the software, because we're going to be seeing a graph here about the type of software that is going to be used. So we have some software that we have here, and a lot of this, for example, if we look at Trados, SDLX, and WordFast, those are translation memories. And a translation memory works a lot like Excel, meaning that when you're working with an Excel document, if you start writing something similar to what you've written before, it will automatically fill that in and give you the chance to decide if that's what you want. Basically, that's what translation memory does, meaning that you have a translation memory. At first, it's blank, it has nothing. But the more documents that you work on, the better your translation memory gets. And if you are working for a company, like we did years ago for Big Cola, Big Cola was trying to accredit its processes. And so many of its documents were like the same. There were just certain parts of it that changed according to the flavor or the color or the size. And so we had to like pull the documents open again and look through the documents to find the right one. If we had used translation memory, we could put this new document in and it would give us what we had already done before. And in some parts, it would say, this is 100% what this is. Boom, there it is. This is 75%. This is 20%. This is 0. And so it shows you what you've done before and then asks you if you want to substitute that. It makes translation much easier and much faster, but only if you have a good translation memory and you've worked a lot of documents with it. Now, a lot of times the company will give you a translation memory to work with because other translators have worked on the same type of documents and the agency wants the same vocabulary, the same structures. And so the translation memory will help you keep the document consistent with the other types of documents. A lot of the jobs will ask for this type of translation memory. If you haven't heard of it or if you haven't worked with it, it is something that I recommend that you work with. A lot of these other ones here are design software like the AutoCAD, the QuarkXPress, the Deja Vu. These are design software, meaning that if your client is an architect, they might work with specific software in order to make their documents programs. They want you to do the translation in that software. Maybe you're working with a car company and the car company has its documents in this type of software. They would expect you to do the translation directly in that software. And things like Dreamweaver, FrontPage, PageMaker, these are website, or used to be website software, so that if you are translating a website, you would probably be expected to work directly in that software, right? Now, many people, many agencies, many companies, many people, clients, don't work with software and don't expect you to be able to do that. But this is something that we need to know. We need more than Office. We need more than Office as translators. And this is the graph that we see here. A big part of this, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Adobe, right? So a little less than half of the circle is Office. But if you look, the big blue one here is Trados. The purple one next to it is SDLX, and the red next to it is WordFast, meaning that that big chunk right there, the client would expect you to use that software as your translator. If you don't use that kind of software, you're missing over a fourth of the market. The other fourth of the market is the design software, the website creator software. Okay? And so if we don't use anything else besides Office, we're missing a little over half of the work that's available to us. So using software and equipment is going to be important in order to be able to get more jobs and work with more agencies and companies in order to have more work, to get more jobs. This is just a very quick list of some of the biggest companies. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit later a page that you might think about joining. And what they do is list these jobs. These are some of the companies, some of the agencies that have the most jobs available on these websites. And so there's tons, right? Tons of agencies that are looking for translation. But specifically for English to Spanish, these are the ones that have the most job listings for those 6 months that we were working with. Okay. Now, specialty areas. This is a topic that we've touched just a little bit during the semester. If you look at this graph, you see two very big pieces of the pie. One of them is a lighter tan color on the right-hand side, and the other one is more of a yellow color on the left-hand side. That is legal and technical, right? So as you see here, legal and technical are going to be the biggest pieces of work that we want. If we look right about here, right, we see this green piece here, the blue one next to it, that's literary, which unfortunately for many of us that enjoy literary translation, it's a very small piece of the pie for us. Mostly because there are only about 3 countries where most of the literary translation is done into Spanish, and Mexico is not one of them, right? We also have this very larger blue piece, which is chemical, a larger whitish piece here, which is medical, pharmaceutical, healthcare, all right? And here, like in between, right here, we have general translation, IT, architecture, design, art, software, financial, construction, okay? We also have here games, business, communication, commerce, not communication. And much smaller pieces are going to be travel, marketing, and real estate, nutrition, agriculture. And of course, the blue piece, which is literary. So you see how it's separated into the areas. If you have been thinking about translating in a certain area, if you're looking for work, you want to work with legal, technical, and we have here medical, pharmaceutical, healthcare, and chemical. Those are our biggest pieces, all right? But we also have very decent pieces right here in front with IT, architecture, software, financial, and construction. And many of our small pieces like travel, maybe we like travel or marketing, those are much smaller pieces of the pie, even though they are available, all right? But they might be more difficult to find. Now, what do these specialty areas involve? Choosing a specialty area is not just about saying, oh, I want to work in this, and I work in it. No, it means studying, it means learning. I recommend that if you're going to work in the legal area, you study law, not a whole degree, but a basic law class, a basic legal class, just to get the ideas, the concepts, and of course the terminology involved. If you're going to work in technical, now technical can be many different areas, but that's something that you might want to work in. Maybe you already have some engineering experience. Maybe for chemical, you already have some chemical experience. Maybe you studied chemistry before studying languages. That's great. That's exactly what we want to look for when we work in translation. Someone who has that kind of experience. Those of you who studied literary translation this semester, some of you have not studied literature. And you've done a good job. But you'll find that when you study literature, it becomes easier. It becomes much more natural, right? So if you are planning on going into a certain area, healthcare, for example, pharmaceutical, chemical, make sure you study up on it. It may be by yourself, reading things, getting concepts, watching videos, or it may be by taking courses. But it's not enough just to say, I want to work in this area, but rather you have to take steps in order to work there. All right. Now, this is the one I was talking to you about before, certification. You see that only about 1/4 of the translations that were required, only about 1/4 of the translations requested required any kind of certification. And so this whole big blue piece of the pie is yours to work with without certification. Like I said, there's a niche. There's a niche for educational documents legal documents, and many medical pharmaceutical documents, some chemical, and a few technical will require a certification. But other than that, you can work. Now, if you work in an agency, they would not expect you yourself to have a certification, but rather you would do the translation and they would have somebody in the agency who could certify those translations. So that takes care off you before. Now, who certifies or who tells you who can certify a translation? Me, I just got pointed at me, right? No, I have a certification. My certification is from the Consejo de la Judicatura Federal. Every year, we have to go and hand in our papers for that year in order to renew our certification. And every year, the Consejo publishes a list of all the peritos. Now, peritos in different areas, peritos in fingerprinting, peritos in the, was it the Stockholm, no, not Stockholm, I don't remember anymore, but there are tons of different areas in construction, for example, right? In chemicals, in psychology. And so they publish this list each year of all the peritos in different areas that might be needed, and translation and interpretation are one of those areas. Now, previously, the Tribunal Superior de Justicia del Estado was the one who would certify, but they would certify very under the table, meaning that nobody knew what the process was. And the person, I worked many years subcontracted by a perito. And actually, she is on the corner there of the school. And she was a perito by the Tribunal Superior de Justicia del Estado de Puebla. And so one day I said, I'm going to go ask what you need to become a perito. And I went there and I said, excuse me, no, ask over there. No. Hey, do you know anything? But I spent 2 hours just going from person to person and nobody knew anything. And so we like to think that maybe it's a little bit of having contacts or having a friends who can certify you. But ever since my first certification from the Consejo was in 2007. So it was a few years before that where excuse me just a second, it was just a few years before that they started making the list. And so you will find that the Procuraduría has a list that they use, and the Tribunal Superior has a list they use, and the Registro Civil has a list that they use. Everybody has lists, right? However, the Consejo is the only one that has like the list that you have to do each year. And I went to the Registro Civil to say, hey, what do I need to? And they said, oh, no, you can't anymore. It's ya está saturado, ya está saturado. And I said, I said, what do I need? And she said, well, we have, for example, the Japanese translator. She's a native Japanese speaker. And I'm going, what's going on? So it's a very tricky process in many cases, meaning that if you know someone, if you have contacts, okay. However, the Consejo de la Judicatura has a very straightforward process. If you have all the papers, you have all the requirements, you get it. If not, you don't get it. Now, one of the requirements for certification from the Consejo is that you have had your degree for at least 5 years. So this is one of those things where you can't like finish and then automatically jump into a certification, but rather you have to get translation experience in there, right? But if you're interested, you can go to the website of the Consejo. It's www.cjf.gov.mx, and you can look at the convocatorias from years, from last year. And you'll be able to see the requirements there to get an idea of what it is you need to get a certification. But certifying translations is a big part of what I do. You can say that I specialize in educational and legal documents. Every now and then I get pharmaceuticals. Just recently we had the glucometro that was imported from China. All right, and all of the manuals and instruction pamphlets and everything had to be translated into Spanish. Most of those have to be certified because the device is coming from a different country. All right, but there's still a big chunk of work without certification, which is very good for you. Now, what does this mean for you as students? Everything that we've seen here, go back here. All right, we've seen, first of all, that there are pages that you can find translation work in. And what might happen is that you get a job on one of these sites with an agency, and the agency likes your work, and they keep giving you more and more and more work. And pretty soon you're not looking for work with these agencies, but rather you're looking for it with these pages, but rather the agency itself is giving you the work that you need, right? Native Spanish speakers and not specified, there's a lot of work for English to Spanish, a lot of it. Residents, no specific residence, that's a big chunk of the pie, meaning that you don't have to live in a specific country or even a specific place in order to get some of this work. Dialects, either not specified, neutral, or Mexican, are big parts of this. It means that there are many other jobs available besides just translation. And these are things that you can specialize and work in. There's a lot of software out there, and if you're planning on doing any kind of work with agencies, you're probably going to have to at least have the translation memory, a Trados, an SDLX, or a WordFast. It means that there's a lot of agencies out there, tons of them. You have to be careful, and I'm going to show you a page where a lot of this work is done. There's a special part on this page called the Blue Board that has translators who have worked for these agencies can put their comments there so that you can be very careful. Maybe an agency contacts you, but other translators have had bad experiences. Then you know. The specialty area. If you're interested in working in a certain area, prepare yourself for that area. Certification, not necessary in many of the translation work available. All right, so this means that you need to think about what you want to do if translation is something that you would like to work in. If it is, you probably need to improve your speed in translating. An average 3,000 to 4,000 words per day would be expected. And now 3,000 to 4,000 words per day, 240 words is about a page for me. And so meaning that 4 pages would be about 1,000 words. So 4 times 3, that'd be 12 pages, 12 to 16 pages. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. Now, sometimes you may have to do much more because the client wants it urgently, right? The client wanted it for yesterday. Or maybe you didn't space out the work as you needed to, and you waited until the last minute and you have to do it much quicker. So we do have to become faster at translating, which means faster at typing, take a typing course. I was very fortunate in high school, and my guidance counselor said, you need an extra course, why not take typing? I said, typing's for business students. He said, no, you might need it in college. Okay. So I took a typing course, and that was the greatest thing I could have done towards translating because it has made me a very quick typist. Get certified to be competitive in the Puebla market. Now, this is specifically the market in Puebla. Certification will help you to get a lot of this work. There are probably two different areas where you'll get in quickly, would be with certification, or if you work in-house, meaning that if a company pulls you in and has you work there with them. Okay. Uh, Freelance translating is something that takes up a lot of your time and a lot of your space and a lot of your energy. And so a lot of times our family life, like right now with these classes online, we have a lot of interruptions. We have a lot of maybe a lack of space. Maybe we need different equipment for it. So organizing your life and your tasks in order to take on this home-based business is going to be important. A comfortable chair, right? A good screen, some good glasses with the reflecting on it, a quiet place, which I know sometimes is difficult, if not impossible. And more than anything, a family that knows that even though you are at home on the computer, you're working and you can't just be interrupted like that, right? Which is very difficult when you have your office right here on the path outside the front door. Study a specialty area in demand, as we had already mentioned, and learn software in demand. I feel that even though many of you have talent as translators, there are still many things that we have to do to refine that talent and to be prepared for what the market is asking from us. Nowadays, this is not a big deal as it was before, but for example, to have a PayPal or Moneybookers or some way that we can receive payment quickly and easily without giving, and we can make payments without giving our credit card or debit card numbers. And so, for example, many of my clients, especially now with the pandemic, right? Now with the pandemic, um, many of them just prefer to deposit the money or to transfer the money to me, and then I scan the translation and send it by PDF for them. And so PayPal has been a lifesaver because some of them have been outside of Mexico and said, can I use PayPal? And I said, yeah, go ahead. Here's the request for payment, right? Consider expanding the areas. As we saw previously, there are more areas than just translation. And so you want to open up and get some experience working there. And most importantly, a lot of us like the idea of translating because we don't have to work with others. But as a translator, we need to work with others. We do need to work with others. And getting involved in translator communities is going to be so important. It's going to be so important. And it's going to give you an idea of what other people are doing, how it's doing. Is that the way that we should be doing it? And I'm going to show you some examples here in a minute. So translation is not something that we can do 100% on our own. And if we're doing it 100% on our own, isolated, we're doing it wrong because we get stuck in the idea that what we're doing is correct. And when we start working with others and seeing what others are doing, we might find that we're not doing it as well as we thought we were doing it. This is an example of one of the pages that I used for the research. And this is one of the communities that I am a member of, and it's called PROS. Now, PROS is connected to the Trados, the translation member. And as members, you get special prices and things like that. But it has a lot of areas here that are very important in order for us to, first of all, put ourselves out there and make people see that we're working in translation. And secondly, to work with this translator community. For example, one of the things that you have on Trados or on PROS is the translation jobs. So this is where I got the information from the research. And you can see here that we have, right, many different jobs available. And I have my preferences here for English to Spanish, Spanish to English. So these are the only jobs that come up on mine. I don't get other languages. And if I'm interested in one of these, I can click on it and it will take me to the information. Now, right now, I do not have a paid membership to this because I didn't feel that I was getting that much benefit out of the paid membership. A lot of these jobs are only available to paid members during the first 3 days. And then after that, it opens up to everyone. All right. So you might think if a paid, I don't know how much the membership is right now, but you might think if a paid membership is something that you want to work with or not. But there's a lot of jobs available to you. Another area of this is the kudos terms, meaning that I'm doing a translation and I just cannot get this term. I don't know what it is. I put it up here. I put as much context as I can with it. And other members give me options. They show me websites that give me this. And hopefully we find a good solution to what the term is. A lot of times this helps when the document that you're translating comes from another country and you're not familiar with that term. Here you're working with people who will know what you're talking about and are able to share it with you. Another area is the translator forums. And sometimes the translator forum is simply, what is your screensaver at the moment? Or it's, how to work with Trados, or be careful, this person is contacting me and wants free translations. Don't work with this company because they do this. How to work with translation during the pandemic, etc. And this really, I think, to me is a very important part of the translation community, because you have communication with people from all over the world that are finding solutions for things that maybe you hadn't found, or maybe you have the solution to something that they're doing. Anytime that we work with a community like this, we have to be respectful. We have to make sure we read all the information before we participate. But it's a good place to get to know others and to become part of a community. All right. This specifically is my profile. I have a page on prose and, picture, name, language. My phone number is here, email is here. This is the information about what I do, what I work with, my calendar as to how I'm available. These days in yellow, I'm partially available. In green, I'm mostly available. So somebody, a prospective client, could visit my page and say, okay, this looks like someone that I could work with, and they'll get in touch with me about what it is that they want to do. All right. And this is a good place to start. It doesn't cost you anything. Even if you're not paying, you can make your page and you build it up. You add information about your services, about your rates. Every time you participate in the kudos, in the words, you get points for that. Good grief. Someone's desperately trying to get in touch with me. All right. Portfolios, your specialty areas, all the information that you can need. All right, you would use, you can put there. Now, what happens, first of all, when I put my name in Google, when I Google myself, I'm very proud of what comes up in Google right now when I Google myself. The first thing is that misprofesores.com, which I'm rather happy with, so yay for me, right? The next thing is translations on Facebook. The next thing are videos. The next thing is the front of my house, my address, my phone number, all this information. So right away, someone can say, oh yeah, I was working with Marcia Way. And all they have to do is Google Marcia Way, and it comes right up there. If you also Google Perito Traductor Puebla, my name comes up in one of the first places. And you can see, pictures of me, all kinds of pictures of me. And you see my LinkedIn, you see my prose page, which I just showed you. You see my BabbleCube page. And so right away in Google, I come up there. And I think that is really the most, this is my, right away you get my Kindle, my Amazon page. So right away you get a lot of information. You get a lot of information about what I do. If someone is looking for me, if someone is looking for me, they'll find me. It's easy to find me. And they find me by my name. If someone says, oh, look for Marsha Way on internet, they look for me, they find me. If they say, I need a perito traductor, they put Perito Traductor Puebla, they find me. And I think that's the most important thing is we need to be visual. We need to be prepared. We need to be prepared, but we also need to be very visual so that they can find us. I used to have an advertisement in the Yellow Pages. Remember the Yellow Pages? It cost a little over $1,000 each month, right, for a year. And I probably had that for 4 or 5 years. And it was a good expense. It was a good expense when people used the Yellow Pages. But ever since about, I think probably 2013, 2014, I stopped using it because really people don't use the Yellow Pages anymore, but rather they substitute it for internet. So really being a translator, I think is so much more, being a professional translator, I think is so much more than just even just knowing how to translate, because it involves knowing software, it involves being able to work in a community, it involves being able to get jobs, being able to work with clients. I love being able to sit and translate in my pajamas all day. However, if I know a client is coming, I put on my good clothes, even though I'm at home, because I'm going to have to meet with them. And so there are many aspects of being a professional translator. I think you have the potential to be. But the purpose of this talk was for us to see that it takes much more than just being able to translate. All right. And my question is, are we ready? Do we have what we need in order to be able to go from our studies and dive right into the world of translation? Maybe, maybe not. This is for you right now to reflect on, think about, start researching software, research courses that you want to take, research certification. Look at these pages, look at pros.com. What were the other pages that we had? Language 123, Translators Cafe, trabajofreelance.com. Take a look at those pages, look at what's available. See what's there and see what you have. If you need to learn how to type, if you want to start practicing with voice recognition software so you don't have to type, you can speak and the computer will type for you. It's a great way to do it. Word right now has a wonderful automatic translator. It has a really good automatic translator. So you might want to start putting documents into the translator and seeing how easy it is to correct them rather than to do the translation from scratch. But there are so many things that we need to learn before we actually start translating. I dove into the deep end. I learned these things the hard way. I became a translator by accident. Somebody said, hey, I need a translation. I said, okay, I can do it. And that was my first translation. And since then, I started working with a professional translator. I didn't get much feedback. And so I think I kept making the same mistakes. But I think here the important thing is that we know what we know what we need to be doing in order to get in and be doing it well from the beginning and not have to learn from our mistakes later. All right, and Juan Carlos says, how necessary would you consider a master's? A master's in translation interpretation, honestly, master's degrees I find to be kind of useless. Everybody wants them, everybody wants a master's, but really in translation interpretation, only if you're planning on teaching it. If you're planning on teaching it, yes, definitely, all right? But a master's in translation interpretation, in order to translate better, interpret better, now, this is if you already have like a bachelor's in translation interpretation. I think a master's is redundant. But more than anything, like we said, courses in the areas that you're planning on working in, practice in translation, a typing course, software courses, all right? Maybe a certification in Trados, but so that you can use the translation memory without a problem. But a master's in translation interpretation, no. Now, I think in order to be certified, the Consejo de la Judicatura, they're now, I was lucky, I got in with my teaching degree and my translation experience. I don't have a translation degree. I think now they're asking for a translation degree. So if you don't have a bachelor's in translation, you may need a master's in order to compensate that. Now, I don't know, maybe you can complete your degree in Enseñanza del Inglés and you can point out that you took courses in translation, even though your whole degree is not translation, you did take electives in translation. And that might be important for you to be able to get the certification without an actual translation degree. But a master's, I think only if you're planning on teaching translation. And only that because the school will require it. Other than that, not so much. All right. Any other questions? How do you feel? Do you feel ready? Do you feel like this is something you would like to do and that you can prepare yourself for?
I have a comment.
Yeah,
Well, there are some jobs that they don't pay much, but they take in like students and they train them in software and all this kind of stuff. So you gain experience, and I think that's very useful. Although you're not making a lot of money,
right.
but they help you for the future.
Definitely, definitely. And they're taking you in, they're possibly giving you, certification in software or courses that you need. They're giving you job experience. They're giving you things that you can use on your CV. So maybe, they're not paying a lot. This is one of those things where you have to decide if you want a lot of pay or if you want to learn how to actually work in the area. And the good thing is, if you learn how to actually work in the area, eventually you're going to get very good pay. Now, I would be careful because a lot of times people want you to work for free and they don't offer you anything. And I like the idea that you said, Samuel. There are some that compensate for the low salary. They give you courses and they give you training. That's important. If they don't give you anything and they still want to pay you 20 pesos for the translation, say no, it's not worth it because it doesn't work for your CV. It doesn't prepare you for anything. And you're exactly right. It's just taking advantage. Translation is one of those areas where people think it should be much cheaper than it is. All right. Translation costs a lot because it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of preparation, it takes a lot of equipment, and that takes money. So, for example, as I said, my page is 240 words approximately, and I charge right now 200 pesos for that page. I'm one of the lower end translators. I think the school right now is charging 250 for a similar page. And one of the teachers that does translations there, I think is charging like 500 a page because he can, you know. So yeah, pay is very good when you get it. Now, when you're subcontracted, obviously you're going to get much less. Okay, to start with. When I started translating, now this was in, oh my gosh, I started translating when my son was born, 1994, 95. I started in 95. And I was getting 20, 30, 40 a page, which at that time was not bad at all. Now it sounds terrible. All right. But as you learn more, as you get more experience, as you're able to certify, it goes up. But yes, at first you might be expected to do things for less money, but there should be compensation for that, either in training or other job opportunities, things, experience that you can put on your resume. Okay. Yeah. Any others? Any other questions or comments that you have? All right. Well, thanks for being with me today. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you learned from them. I'm really glad that, you were able